And now I'm having to put my money where my mouth is of saying, actually, I'm doing the most important work, even though nobody's paying attention and nobody cares. My resume is like, in an ash heap at the bottom of the fireplace. And it's like, can you believe it emotionally?
Hey friends, welcome back to Practically on Purpose, the podcast for people who've done all the right things and are now asking deeper questions. Today's guest is Jordan Call, and this conversation is one I've been excited to share for a while. Jordan spent years climbing to the top of the legal conservative movement, University of Chicago law, clerkships, prestigious positions, the whole impressive arc. And then he walked away, not for a higher status title, but for something far less common in those circles: to be a full-time, stay-at-home dad. We talk about what it's like to step off the conveyor belt of elite achievement, coming to terms with our hunger for external validation, navigating faith, and building a meaningful life. Jordan writes at the Farewell Files on Substack, and he's funny, thoughtful, and disarmingly honest. We get into all of it: law, fatherhood, Mormonism, creativity, and even his one-time quest to make friends with local crows. This is a fun one. Let's dive right in. Jordan, thank you so much for being here. I think that I was looking back at, it's hard to look at your history with someone. I feel like Facebook was actually better at this than Substack. And maybe they'll add it to as the platform becomes more social. But I think that we actually first connected through a mutual Substack on Paul Millard, which I think for those people who know Paul, he writes over at The Pathless Path. He was one of the OGs, I guess I would say, of this generation of folks who are stepping away from the achievement path, stepping into lives, multifaceted lives that are much more authentic and meaningful for them. But I think it says a lot about where both of us are in our journeys. I think asking questions, trying new things out. And I believe it was one of your Substack notes that said something like that you got to the top levels of the legal game in the conservative legal movement, and then you left the law and became, and I found this, a statusless full-time dad of 3 and counting. And then when you said that your writing was John Donne meets Dave Barry, I was like, all right,
Right.
I gotta meet this guy.
I remember that note. Yeah. And I remember your response.
I was like, hi, friend.
Yeah.
So, let's zoom way out for a moment. Growing up, how did you think about success and purpose?
Man. Okay. So I was obsessed, I think, looking back. I was obsessed with status. I didn't recognize what that was or what that meant yet. What I latched onto in the first instance was the great composers, the great pianists, classical music. I was a precocious musician and really took to piano and kind of taught myself a bunch of theory and learned a lot about classical composition and all of these things. And I used to just check out these books from the library about Mozart and about Beethoven, and I would read them and I would just be like, I have to be this kind of person. I was like, someday I'm going to be at this book's The Lives of the Great Composers. I want to be one of these in this book. That was my
It'll
goal.
be Jordan Call next
Yeah.
chapter.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so I got started. I mean, I was like 10 years old, but I was composing and
Wow.
and throughout my whole youth, I was trying to be like a concert pianist, or I wanted to be an orchestra conductor, and I was always composing, and I felt like I was hopelessly behind because Mozart wrote his first concerto at 7, and here I was writing mine at 14, and I felt so embarrassed that I was you know what I mean?
It's so embarrassing,
Yeah.
Jordan. Oh.
Really, really, that was how I felt about it, because I wasn't really comparing myself to kids around me. I was comparing myself to history, is kind of how I thought
To
about
the
it.
greats. Yeah.
And so I was really, I thought that I just loved music. But I think looking back, thinking about the status lens is really interesting, because I did love music, but I think I also liked the idea of grown-ups thinking that I was really precocious because I knew about,
Mm.
Beethoven sonatas, and I could talk about, these kind of high
Mm-hmm.
art, high status markers. And I didn't really care what my peers thought of me as much. I wasn't interested in the bands that the other kids liked in high school. I was more signaling, I thought signaling kind of higher to like, and so I
To
thought
the
like,
adults.
I
Yeah.
don't care what people think about me. But really what it was just I was aimed at a different social strata, right?
Right. You didn't care what your peers, what kids thought
Right.
about you, because this wasn't child's play, right?
Right.
Like you needed to be taken seriously by the
Yeah.
adults.
So I think I just had this feeling that I was different and wanting to be recognized, a desire to for people to see that and recognize it and prove it to myself. That was kind of my initial place where status kind of came into the
Mm,
picture.
mhm.
And then it's interesting to see how that kind of morphed over time.
Yeah, the question was how did you think about success and purpose?
Yeah, so for me, success was being one of the, an internationally renowned, historically great,
Historically significant.
art. Yeah, exactly, yeah. That was what I felt like success was. Now, I will plant this seed, sow this thread,
Okay.
which was that being raised a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, I also had this like strong competing idea, which was that like we're all equal in the eyes of God. And like
Mm.
really the only thing that matters is that we're children of God. And the thing worth being ambitious about is being like Jesus, like
Mm.
self-sacrificing, loving others, things that are invisible, things that people don't recognize and the world doesn't care about necessarily or doesn't value in the same way. And so I always felt that as well. Like I kind of wanted both. I wanted to be like huge success by the world standards, but I also wanted to be like a spiritual success. Uh, and
Mm.
those have, I have, those two wolves have grabbed, I have fed them both a lot, both of
Both.
those wolves. Yeah.
Yes. No, I can, I resonate with that quite a bit because I'm similarly someone who always sort of like sought I think I liked being like the only kid in the room with adults and having adult like conversations, wanting to be special, wanting to be important, but I was raised Catholic and, I always thought about the Beatitudes and I thought a lot about Christ's model and, that the meek shall inherit the earth. And I think the way that I tried to write it in my mind was like, oh no, but I'm like so meek. Like, I'm not trying to be, I just want to be the best. Like, if that happens to mean that I'm better than everyone else, that's fine. But I'm not going to like compete with other people to get, I don't know. It was some sort of like strange logic like that.
You can only handle so much cognitive dissonance as a 12-year-old, right?
Yes, totally. So then, how did you end up finding your way or like, let's play out the music thread
Yeah, sure.
a little bit more. How did that end up manifesting, after it took until 14, I think you said, to write your first was it a
Concerto.
symphony?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Concerto, okay. And, yeah, what happened after that?
So I think that a couple of different things happened. One was that my spirit was broken a little bit about the ambition of being a great, musician because I entered this competition. I'll write about this at some point, but it was the state fair, the Utah State Fair. And I didn't even place as a pianist. And like
Mm,
I went to the
hmm,
concert for the winners and the kid that won was like already a touring concert pianist. He was like 16 years old, 15 or 16, and he was playing with orchestras and was like, yeah, and it was just like, this guy's on a completely different level from me.
yeah,
And my mom, who is kind of the source of the genetic source of my ambition, but also spent her life trying to diffuse it because she, was like, I think saw it as an inevitable way to be disappointed, was
mm,
always trying to just be like, it doesn't, it's okay, it doesn't matter. And after that concert, I just broke down and I was just like, I'm never going to achieve my dreams. And she kind of had this talking to with me about like, look, you don't have to be the best to be happy. And in fact, if you rely on being the best to be happy, you're never going to be happy. Like there will always be somebody better than you. There will always be, if you're comparing yourself to others, you're never going to win.
wow,
And so I had this kind of like, okay, I need to get control of this ambition thing, right? Now, it did just kind of pop out in other places. I think the other thing that happened is that I started to resent the idea that people would just think of me as a musician because I felt like I had a lot more to offer.
To be
Yeah.
just a
There
musician.
was a kid in my high school who is incredible. I mean, he's an incredible jazz musician and pianist, and he had, like, embroidered on his backpack, it said, like, "Jazz boy" or something, and I remember being like, "I don't wanna just be like a jazz boy."
Boy.
Yeah, you know what I mean? So I actually kind of ended up not pursuing music formally in my
Mm,
kind of higher education. People assume I majored in music. No, I majored in English, I didn't try to do music as my career. I kind of was like, yeah, I'm good enough. I'm good enough at that to put that in my back pocket and have that be like a surprise, amazing thing. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So in the end, I didn't pursue it, as an adult in that way, although it's a huge part of what I do and have always done. I've never like just stopped, but I kind of stopped framing it as my success metric. So
mhm.
yeah.
As the thing that you were aiming towards as, like, this is the peak expression of Jordan in the world. So then how did you end up in the law, in law school and, yeah, in a career in the law?
So one of the things that I was kind of taught by my parents was like, okay, especially probably my mom, but it was this idea of like, okay, you know, it's important that you like get through your education, get to pay dirt, get a good job, raise your family, and not just from them, but like I think that my church culture, it was very much like we get married early 20s, kids
Mhm,
early 20s. You need to be supporting these kids. That's your role. It's not just like the man and the woman are going to work or whatever. It's like, yeah, the
mhm.
husband provides and the wife is at home. So I did a really short major at BYU. English was like 3 years and I was out. Yeah, 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 3 years with a mission in between. It was like 5 years. I was actually a little old when I graduated, but because I had spent 2 years doing my mission.
Yeah.
And then I was like, I'm gonna go to business school. I was always planning on business school. And I went to the advisors and they were like, well, you need to have like 2 to 5 years of work experience to apply to business school. And I said, no one's gonna hire me. I have an English degree.
That wasn't part of the
Yeah,
plan.
so I was like, all right, I'm not gonna get into business school by working at Shake Shack for the next 2 years with my English degree.
Mhm.
So I was like, well, who will take me? And somebody floated the idea of law school, I think one of my professors, and I started to look into it. I don't think I met a lawyer until college. I knew nothing about
Wow.
law, nothing. And all I knew was that they were, like, sleazy. That's, like, literally, I think the only thing that I
Oh,
knew
that's
about
so
lawyers is
funny.
that everybody hates them because they're like I knew the jokes. That's all I knew.
But you also knew that they were interested in unemployed English majors.
Yes, well, I found that out
You found that
critically,
out.
yeah, and then as I looked into it, and found out kinda what they did at a high level, I'm like, "Oh, I'll be good at this, I think. This is,
Mm,
like, really in line with my, like, core competencies."
mhm.
So, I decided to hit that hard. I took the LSAT, did well, and kind of the more I went into it, the more it was like, "Oh, yeah, this is gonna be something that I'll do well," and lawyers make a lot of money. I actually was about an order of magnitude off about how much money they actually can make. I was the underestimating direction. I had no idea. Yeah, I had no idea the kind of salaries that, like, law firm partners at a big firm can make. It's funny to think about. So anyway, so I was just like, well, let's try it. Might as well do it. I can get through law school in 3 years, be providing for my family. This is going to be a stable job for the
Mm.
rest of my life and, a really hard skill that I can sell instead of just like being an entrepreneur, which I would have preferred to do, or trying to do something with English, which I would have probably preferred to do, or music, which I would have preferred to do. So
So it was the safe choice
yeah.
and the safe choice to a life for your family. So let's fast forward then through law school. What kind of law did you end up practicing?
So I gravitated towards litigation and I worked at a firm in Utah where I did general litigation. I didn't really like, specialize. And then because I got it lined up late, my clerkship, I didn't start it until a year after working at that firm.
Mm, mhm.
So I went and did a clerkship on the Utah Supreme Court. And that's obviously appellate litigation, right?
Yeah.
And then that got leveraged into that was when, and this is a whole other story, but that was when Trump got elected and was doing his short list and putting a bunch of judges through. I was kind of like being a relative social conservative through my faith and just dispositionally capitalist and stuff. I was like in that network of kind of conservative legal movement. Yes, FedSoc, something even more like it's called the Burke Society at U Chicago. Yeah.
Okay.
So
Okay. I feel like I've like heard about it
yeah,
at law school, reading about the conservative movement or
yeah.
something like that.
Yeah. So I was like, I was always, I'm not really a joiner in general. And I was never really, I never really felt like it, like a true believer, but they all seemed like me. And it was like, I liked them. And it was kind of this thing of like, okay, great. And I ended up, one thing led to another. And I ended up with a clerkship with Amy Barrett,
Wow.
who became prominent, more
I've
prominent
heard of
later.
her.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
For people who don't know, she is currently, she's our newest,
No,
right?
I think,
No, KBJ is our, okay. So she is one of our newer Supreme Court justices. And actually, really, I don't know if we'll go into this, but she has had some like very interesting jurisprudence and decisions since being on the court.
that is what I hear. So
That's what they're saying.
yeah. So anyway, she was on the Seventh Circuit at the time. I got hired by her like immediately. Like as soon as you finish this clerkship, I'll take you, which is amazing because most of the time clerkships are a few years out, but this
Mm-hmm.
happened to just fit right into my timeline. So I moved out to Indiana and did that on the Seventh Circuit, and then leveraged that into a job at a boutique kind of conservative Supreme Court litigation firm, which was a really interesting and fun time. Substantively, I really hated just the law firm life, like the industry. Like these aren't things that you can really avoid, and I didn't think the firms I worked at were great, but
Mm-hmm.
like they're law firms and I didn't like being at a law firm. So that was my whole really career in law. But that's anyway, I get you asked what I practiced, and that's mostly litigation, mostly appellate litigation, frankly. um so yeah.
So I guess there's a lot to like about the law and there's a lot not to like about the law. What were some of your frustrations with legal practice?
So I won't throw like ADHD around, but I think I definitely, the way that I worked, like I think I have some attention issues in general and had, in the sense that like I work really well in like bursts, but not really well in a very kind of linear way. And having to account for my work in the 6 minute increment was
Mm-hmm.
absolutely anathema to my whole being, because it like, if you don't ask how the sausage is made, I'm going to get good sausage. But if the
Yeah.
whole thing is like describe in detail the steps of the sausage, that was not very good for me.
No.
Yes.
No, and it's hard to bill for like, I don't know, wandered aimlessly around the 33rd floor looking out the window. And that it
Right.
was the moment, right?
Right.
That like a strategic insight occurred to you.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
yeah, it's rough accounting for your time that way.
And I think, I mean, Paul Millard would be, yeah, this is, I'm sure, the complete opposite of his philosophy too, of like, you can't, like, the value that you're creating isn't always, it's not like a one-to-one of inputs and outputs, and like doing things that, yeah, just like you said. And like, for instance, like we weren't supposed to bill, I think this was at both firms, but there's kind of a policy against billing for like conversations that you're having with other lawyers. And it's like, that's how I think, like this is the whole thing. Like, what do you want me to be doing? Like, as long as I'm scrolling Westlaw with my eyes glazed over, that I can charge you
Then you're
for.
doing, yeah,
Yeah.
that's important work.
Yeah. So I just felt a real, like at the high level, I felt a real disconnect between like my inputs and the outputs and like what was being measured and all of that. I
Mm-hmm.
also was extremely anxious all the time when I was like, the idea that I could get an email at any moment that would like Christmas
Mm-hmm.
Day, and it's like, hey, this fire comes up, and it's just like, I could not handle that feeling all the time of like, oh no, now I have, on top of whatever else I'm doing, I have this research project that could balloon into 20 hours of wasted time. That was also
Yeah.
hard and anxiety inducing, is like the idea that with research, you can't just guarantee that you'll do it. Like that if you put in the work, you'll get an outcome. You can waste dozens and dozens and dozens of hours.
Mm.
And at some point you have to go back and be like, I can't find anything. And the partner's like,
Like
look
there's
a little
no
harder.
answer.
Yeah, look a little harder. And you're like, yeah, throw myself out the window. So I was anxious and didn't feel like I'm a very like 80/20 results oriented, not process oriented person. And it felt like the opposite of that. It felt like it was really for
Mm,
people who can like sit down and chug and plug away and aren't going to be made anxious by, that kind of thing. Just it was not a good fit dispositionally. As much as it was a
yeah.
good fit substantively for me, which I think it generally was.
Hmm.
Like I liked being able to play with the ideas and think things through and write. I loved to write. I loved writing.
Mm.
As much as I hated research, I loved writing.
Even
So,
legal
yeah,
writing, you.
it was hard and way less fun than Substack writing, but I did like it.
So what made you step away? It's like there's a lot of people who we know both. A lot of people who are like, I have crippling anxiety and, I'm not loving having to account for all of my hours, but I am making a ton of money. I am providing for my family, and especially coming from your faith where being that male provider was so important. Yeah, what made you decide to step away? What did that look like?
So, it was easier for me than it might have been. I don't know if I would have had the kind of you know, the Paul Millard courage of like, I'm going to quit with no plan kind of thing because my wife, the interesting dynamic was I expected to marry somebody who was planning on being a stay-at-home mom, and I was gonna
Mm,
provide. Well, I married somebody who was a convert to my faith, and her whole life had planned on working and actually is just, like, born to work. Like, she loves her career, she loves the work that she does. She's brilliant and hire her over me for almost anything. And so when we got married and I kind of broached, like we were doing this thing of like, okay, we got to move and try to both find a job for both of us and who are we moving for and who's kind of the
mhm.
primary partner in the workforce, blah, blah, blah. We navigated that for a while and at some point it was like, this doesn't really make sense. And we got pregnant with our first. And I was like, well, I always kind of wanted somebody, a parent at home. That was my mom stayed at home. That's important to me. She's
Mhm.
like, "Well, I don't really wanna do that." And I was like, "Okay." And I was like, "Well, I don't really wanna work at a job." So it was just we just kinda were like, "Well, what if I just stay at home?" And she said,
Mhm.
"Yeah, sounds great." And so that made it really easy because we still had a stable income. She's has high earning potential. She's got all the credentials and the gold stars and things,
And
lots of opportunities.
what did your families or your community or even other folks in your church think about that to the extent that people told you what they were thinking?
Yeah, most people have been positive, especially people who are close to me, of the people that care. Occasionally, it'll raise an eyebrow at church or more often in like a professional setting. We go to some cocktail party or something and it's like, "What do you do?" And I'm like, "I'm home with my kids." And it's like, "Oh, I picked the wrong person to talk to." I can't I
Like, "Oh,
can't
no. How do I get out
I
of
can't
this?"
gain anything from you. So, the overwhelming majority of people, as far as I can tell, never think about it. They do not care. This is the one of the kind of the point of one of my recent pieces that you commented on. Is just kinda like, it doesn't really nobody's really watching that closely?
Mhm.
So, I felt a little self-conscious at first. I would be like, "I'm a stay-at-home dad, but I used to be a lawyer," or I'd say, "I used to be a lawyer, but now I'm a stay-at-home dad," or whatever, and now more and more I forget I used to be a lawyer, and I just introduce myself as a full-time parent, and I don't really think about it.
So this is interesting because I also wrestle with this and, what do you do? I'm fortunate to live in a part of New York where now, when I was in New York City, it was like everyone's first question. So what do you do? And I want to instantly assess like how valuable you are to me, how much of my time I should invest in this conversation. Up where I live, people usually ask more like, "Oh, how do you spend your time?" And I'm sure people are still doing some of that calculus in the background, but it's just like a little bit more opaque. Uh, but yeah, I still have that temptation where I'm like, "Oh no, I went to I used to be a lawyer. I used to, if I really want to impress someone, like, oh, I used to be general counsel and, head of people at this tech startup and,
I went to
you
school in
know,
the Boston area.
in the Boston. Yeah, I went to school near
Yeah.
Boston.
Not Tufts.
Yeah, yeah. Fun fact, Tufts does not have a law school. So for also the non-lawyers who are listening, it is yeah, this is like the joke of, and I did this too when I first got into Harvard. Of like, oh, I go to law school near Boston, and finding out it's like my husband, my now husband, then boyfriend was like, that is just so douchey. Just say you went to
Yeah.
Harvard, please stop. And I was like, okay, thanks. I'll stop.
Yeah, the not
But
the
yeah,
not
it's like,
Tufts thing isn't Tufts slander. It's just the 30 Rock reference if you've never seen that.
yeah. But it's hard, saying what I do now. And I feel like there's a lot more that I need to sit with and meditate around, quote unquote, just being a mom, and if I'm being honest, even now I still am like, oh, well, I'm writing or, I have a podcast. And it's so funny, by the way, like how many people are like, oh my God, you have a podcast. That's so impressive. And I'm like, yeah, I've got a Wi-Fi connection and I bought this mic out
Right.
Sweetwater. And like, turns out they just let you have a podcast. There's actually very few barriers to entry. To do that. But I would be curious to hear for you, now that you are in a place where, you have 3 kids at this point. So you had 1 kid when you first made the decision to become a stay-at-home dad. Now you are at least 3, 5 years into the process?
Yes,
How
yeah,
many?
5.
5 years. What would you say that embracing fatherhood has taught you about these identity, status, and meaning games that we're all playing?
Well, it's interesting because I feel like these are like high arcing lessons that I'm still learning very slowly. And I'll admit that I still do all the same things that you described, especially internally, right? Like I have a whole separate status track that I'm still working on of like, okay, can I get a lot of Substack subscribers or whatever it is, right? I'm
Mm-hmm.
always still hustling with that kind of thing. But and the truth is that like I'm a little probably hypocritical or I'm doing a little bit of sleight of hand when I talk about giving up my law status because I I know that people will recognize that easily as a relinquishing of status, but
Mm,
didn't really care about that status particularly. Like I didn't really see becoming a lawyer as something that was like, that's what I want to do with my life. The way some people do. I know some people it's like their dream of like maybe they grew up like watching Matlock or whatever. I don't know. But like some people think being a lawyer is like the coolest thing you can be. And for me it was always just kind of like, yeah, this is the thing I'm doing. Like I don't know. It's not really. So I a little bit like play that card strategically. I think I play the card strategically without there being as much emotional as much of it doesn't have as much of an emotional sacrifice as it might seem to the outside, right? Like I think it was
right.
easier for me to give that up than I'm letting you believe that it was, if that makes sense.
No, that definitely makes sense.
That said, things that I've learned about status and stuff as a parent, you always hear that like on your deathbed you're just gonna wish you'd spent more time with your loved ones and things like that. And I do feel I feel like it's unlikely that I'll look back and be like, gosh, I wish I had had a job instead of raised my kids. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It's possible, but unlikely. And I think the funny thing is that the job of a full-time caregiver for kids is like a hard one and one that I don't always enjoy that much, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But it's a lot clearer to me the good that I'm doing in the world than it was when I was a lawyer.
Yeah, that's definitely, that resonates quite a bit. I mean, I was a healthcare lawyer and I felt really good about the work that I was doing usually when I'm like representing hospitals, but we did a lot of work representing private equity sponsors and all, and I'm like, now looking back, 15 years from that, there's all these articles about how like that was basically the worst thing to do. And oh, this is the reason that our healthcare system's so broken. But it's interesting because I think that, when many of us coming from, Harvard Law or University of Chicago Law look at our classmates and, or at least I'll speak for myself, when we looked at classmates and like, "Oh, you're staying home now with the kids." It'd be like, "Oh, that's cute," or like, "Oh, that's sweet." Really not appreciating how important that work is. And, we don't have to talk about politics, but I think that everyone on all sides of the equation, like, we can look at certain political leaders and be like, that person's like totally cuckoo. How did they get that way? Or that person is a monster. How did they get that way? And there really is no more important work than like shaping these young minds and hearts and souls to bring whatever the energy is that we're trying to see more of in the world. So that's something that I just remind myself of often, that it's like, actually, there really is no more important work for our future than.
It's funny because I have this interesting opportunity to put my money where my mouth is, because I used to argue with I had a girlfriend and she wanted to work, and at the time I was less flexible about some of my views on this kind of thing, and I was
Mm,
kind of like, no, it's like you're just like you're being fooled by like big feminism or something, that like it's that going into the workforce is the important thing or the valuable thing that you can contribute to society. But that's like a worldly view, right? Like I have this model that like a long time ago, like going out and providing for your family was a sort of a brutal, unpleasant affair, right? And so it's something you did as a sacrifice, not as a status symbol.
mm,
But then on the
mhm.
flip side, the women that stay home, they're also making this huge sacrifice to provide for the kids, or to take care of the kids and to nurture and to do all of this stuff. Like you're both giving yourself up for your family, right? That was kind of the
Yeah.
model that I had. Well, what's funny is, as time's gone on and the industrial revolution and then like the technological revolution, all these things, jobs have become increasingly cushy and kind of more status than actual work, right? So
Yes.
it's like, oh, look at me, I get to go to my email job and I get to tell people what to do. And so of course you're going to say, well, I want part of that, I want
I
to
want
be a
to do that one.
decision maker. Yeah. So it's not a tricked by big feminism thing at all. Really what it is it's a natural consequence of like the shifting nature of like what work is. So I would
Mhm.
argue about this and I would say, no, like you rock who, she who rocks the cradle rocks the world kind of thing. And like in the eternal scheme of things, that's what really matters. And like there's, there's some teachings in our faith that's like, God isn't going to care like what your titles were, what your jobs were. He's going to ask you, how did you discharge your duties as a family member and a friend and these kinds of things, right?
Mhm.
So I believed that, and I said, like, when I go into the workforce, I'm not doing it to self-gratify. I'm doing it to sacrifice for my family, which I did because I didn't like being a lawyer. So I did that. That was my first like
Mm.
put my money where my mouth was thing. Well, then I left that, and now I'm having to put my money where my mouth is, of saying, actually, I'm doing the most important work, even though nobody's paying attention and nobody cares. My resume is like, in an ash heap at the bottom of the fireplace. And it's like, can you believe it emotionally? Like, I know you believe it
Mm.
intellectually. Can you
Mhm.
actually do it? And this is the longest I've ever had a single job. I've been doing it 5 years, and that's way longer than any other job I ever had. So I'm trying to do it. I'm trying to really believe what I believe, but it is interesting and not always easy. But I do believe that like the work I'm doing is way more important to my, like, will mean way more to my children than the work that I was doing at like would mean to any of my clients or to
Right.
anything else, like just immeasurably more. So not as broad.
Yeah. No, and it's funny because I think, at least, we started off talking about not paying attention to what our peers thought and then sort of like looking to the adults in the room. I remember this was maybe 10 years ago at this point, a woman that I used to work with when I was still very much like in the ambition game, and I'm like, I'm going to be general counsel, that's going to be my next job and I need to get to the top of the heap. A woman that I worked with, I think she was in her 50s at the time. I remember she turned to me when I was pregnant. And so this is gotta be 6 years ago then. Uh, and she was like, your most important job is at home. She's like, you're brilliant at what you do, and you're such a wonderful lawyer, and your most important job is at home. And this was like at my work baby shower. She said this. And I just remember thinking, like, F you.
Yeah.
I was like, what's wrong with you,
Yeah.
lady? But, the more and more I spend time, even now with women in my 50s, I feel like this is part of my karma right now, is like looking to some of the women who are just ahead of me and the lessons and reflections that they have. And so many of them, no matter what point they got to in their career, whether they were always a stay-at-home mom or were in a very senior role at a big company, they always say, you'll never regret spending time with your children, especially when they're young. Like, looking back, those are the years that lit them up most and when they actually felt like they had the most impact in the world. So that's something that now is starting to make sense to me, that really took a while, and it's advice that, I wish that I would have started having kids sooner. But, I had my son when I was 35, my eldest. And it's just interesting because, younger me wouldn't have been able to make that decision. That just like wasn't what I was, I don't know, socialized with. So it's just cool, seeing folks get messages out there about the importance of family and the importance of um, a much more like robust sense of what it means to have a life well lived than one that is just so, career and achievement oriented.
Yeah. I'm really banking on that advice being right. I'm gonna be super mad if I get to the end of my life and I'm like, I do wish I had spent less time with my kids. They were so annoying, you know?
It's so annoying. Yeah.
No, but it's cool to hear that story because I think that I sometimes have a hard time getting out of my own perspective, and sometimes it just feels like, mostly in the sense that it feels like the things that I think about a lot and that I hear a lot, like everybody must be thinking and hearing those things.
Mm-hmm.
And it's through my wife more and kind of the circles that she was in business school and things like that. It kind of have seen that, like, oh, a lot of people don't, nobody does ever give them the advice that, like, hey, you should prioritize, consider making sacrifices in your career to prioritize your family. I thought that that was like the punchline of every Hallmark movie and every 90s movie about dads working too much. Like, I thought we all kind of knew this and we just maybe were like, well, that's dumb, or like, yeah, I'll deal with that later. But like, maybe more people do need to just hear, like, hey, like, really consider this. Like, you may be glad you did. And so it's nice to do this podcast and have a chance to kind of be two examples of like, yeah, we're doing this and I think we're both happy we're doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. Though I'll say I wonder if it's different for women, right? And especially for women like me and for your wife, women who are very high achieving or like, academically, high academic aptitude or something like that.
Brilliant is the word I would use, but yeah.
I'll let you use
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
We can blurb that. Brilliant.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think that we were taught in the 90s, and especially, I was raised Catholic, I'd say that my family was like much more, I don't know, socially progressive, or like our faith wasn't a big part of things as we got older. Yeah, it was like, oh, you're a woman, you can do anything. And that usually meant defining yourself in opposition to motherhood. And it was sort of like, oh yeah, and then motherhood is like, something that you might do at some point if that's interesting to you. And it was definitely never a message in the communities that I grew up in. Having kids young was viewed as a failure, honest, and, I guess I did end up marrying the guy that I was dating when I was 23, but, would joke about, oh, you definitely don't want to marry that person.
Yeah.
I probably didn't want to marry the person I was dating when I was like 20 or 21, but by 23, had matured and wizened quite a bit. But I guess this is all to say that I think that there is an opportunity even, within feminism, um, yeah, that includes creating a really robust life. It goes beyond career, and that being, an accomplished mother or being an accomplished community member or just being like a regular community member, right? Like just being someone who like shows up for a neighbor with some chicken soup or something after they break their leg or something. Like that is a really valuable way to construct and configure a life. And I do think that uh you're seeing a bit of a pendulum swing with at least some of the discourse around trad wives right now. And I think hopefully maybe the pendulum will come back to something that is just like a little bit more integrated than either the like, I don't know, career
Right.
woman versus trad wife
Yeah.
dichotomy.
Why do we like dichotomies so much? I think that something my wife talks a lot about is just the idea that like it would be better if people had more ability to do the thing that they really want to do, male and female, in or out of the home. Like a lot of it has been a
Mm,
ratchet of like more women in the workforce. And it's like, okay, but
hmm.
like, what about all the other directions that can go? Like, what about women that just want to be not in the workforce and not feel like a failure on the
Yes.
ideals of feminism? What about men who don't want to be in the workforce and want to be home with their family? You know what I mean? Like, we've kind of neglected. It's not that more of one of those things is better, it's that more options is better.
Yes.
So, and more sort of social recognition of the value of some of these things would be nice, because I think that I
Mm,
don't know that that's what was intended, but it kind of has turned into this thing of like, well, doing the dishes is like beneath you, you know, right? Like
yes.
this is a,
Hmm.
and it's like, well, what if it's, I mean, I don't like to do it, but that's one of my things that I do around the house. I do the vast majority of the dishes, and it's kind of like that's a way I show my family I love them. Like I don't know, like where's the
Mm-hmm.
indignity in that, you know?
Yeah, and like contributing to like the family function
Yeah,
or the community function
right.
or but all of the less sexy aspects. But it's like someone's got to do the dishes. I don't know. I know some people, right, who just like eat on paper plates,
Yeah,
and that's taking it to an extreme.
that's the galaxy brain meta right there. Paper plates.
Okay. So let's shift over to creativity and Substack. So what brought you to Substack? Tell me a little bit about your journey to writing now.
Yeah, so I all the while that I was doing law, I was doing creative things kind of on the side. It just I can't help it. So, I was playing like 2 hours, 3 hours of guitar a day in law school, that kind of thing.
Impressive.
Yeah, not a nonsense amount of guitar practice for what was supposed to be a legal education, but I when I was at my law firm, I kind of was introduced to the idea of public writing, and so I had a friend who was, like, pitching articles and getting them published, and I was like, "This is cool, I wanna do this, I wanna be this." I didn't know that was an option, I didn't know how to do that. So, for a while, I was pitching articles and got a few published in a few different places, and that was really fun, but I was spending most of my time pitching, a lot less of it writing, and
Writing, yeah.
I felt like I had a, like, a Camaro engine, like a writing engine under the hood, and that like this little public writing was so easy compared to the legal writing that I had to do. You know what I
Mm.
mean? I was like a bodybuilder, and I'm showing up to like move lawn chairs, when it comes to the public writing. And so I kind of that dropped off, and I was focused on music as my creative outlet for a while. And I didn't like the idea of a blog. I just felt like blogs were
What's so
I don't like the
cringe, right?
word. I don't like the word. It felt cringe. It felt like people don't read these. It felt like
No. No one wants to read your blog, right?
the year for that was like 15 years ago at latest, and
Hmm.
it's just a dumb word that I hate. Like it's the dumb, unserious word. And anyway, I just really resisted it. And I felt like it'd be more shouting into the void and, where's the status in this? And anyway, I finally started to get some nudges towards it. I subscribed to a couple of Substacks, no T. I think the first one I subscribed to was Freddie DeBoer, and
Mm.
I subscribed to him for a while. And then Adam Mastroianni, I think is his name. He does experimental history. It's so good. And he hosted like a blog competition, which he actually just hosted his second year of it, and I entered it, which is fun. But
Cool.
he was like, just write a blog, like it could change your life. And I was like, maybe I should. And I months late, I didn't enter the competition, but months late I eventually did. And then Henrik Carlson was another one that I
Mm-hmm.
was following, and his whole thing of I think he has an article called like a blog post is a complex algorithm that gets people to route interesting things into your inbox.
Mm-hmm.
And when I read those, I was like, dang, maybe I should do this. And then I had this feels like kind of almost quaint now, although I was probably a way early adopter of this. But when ChatGPT started to be a thing, I did this like, I'm going to put my whole life into ChatGPT and see what it tells me I should try and do, like just see what it thinks about
Mm-hmm.
like the questions and problems. Cause I had reached an inflection point of trying to figure out which direction I was going to go in my, on the side creative life. And I had tried a YouTube channel. So I had tried public writing. I had done a YouTube channel where I wrote like video essays, among other things. And it was like, I loved that so much, except instead of spending 95% of my time pitching, now I'm spending 95% of my time video editing, which I'm not that
Yes.
good at.
It's
I'm
painful.
not that good
I'm
at
just
it.
starting it.
Yeah, I'm not like a visual guy. I'm not a filmmaker, but the writing felt so good. And it was because I thought this is where people consume essays is on YouTube. So I'll write essays and
Mm-hmm.
then I'll put video over them. And then I'll trick people into reading my writing.
To read, yeah.
So I tried that, but I got overwhelmed by the schedule and the editing, and my heart just wasn't quite in it. And then I tried a few other things, and I was just like, what am I going to do? And it was like, well, sounds like you should have a Substack. And I was like, a Substack? I know some people that do Substacks. And again, as I learned more about it, I was like, this is a really good fit. Like, this is maybe a
Mm.
uniquely excellent fit for me.
Hmm.
And it's funny because it was always available to me, even just starting a blog. But I think it felt like a more legitimate kind of blog. I had consumed enough of some of them that I respected the format
Yeah.
and the platform. Wow, format, platform. And then I just finally was like, yeah, I'm going to try this. And it was so much better than I could have imagined. So I wish I had done it a long time ago. I wish, if I had been a little more heads up, but you get there eventually, right? If you just don't stop, if you don't settle, you
Yeah.
eventually find the right thing.
The thing that's right for you.
And so far, and I don't know where I'll be in 10 years, but like right now, this is exactly the thing that I need to be doing. Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Cannot
Yeah.
overstate.
So I spent like a day or two in my Substack journey getting caught up in like growth hacking and all the tips and you have to niche, right? Like you have to have one specific audience and you're solving one specific problem for them. You're not doing that. Your writing is so varied, and I love it because I'm just getting to know you, but it feels like an expression of Jordan rather than anything that is like easily labelable or like something you can put into a box. And I'd be curious, how's it been for you just putting all of it out there rather than, having a specific niche? And especially when, there's also this temptation towards growth and monitoring subscribers and followers and all of that.
Yeah. And this is actually a reason that I started the Substack quite a bit later than I finally did. Oh, I should have said too that I had some conversations with friends about this. I should shout them out. They know who they are, but like that pushed me to finally start the
Mm.
Substack. So I was for a while I was like, well, I don't want to start it until I know like what niche I'm gonna do. But I just it is I used the word anathema already once. I've already burned my anathema card, but
Yeah.
man, it is just anathema to everything about me. I have always hated, I said I wasn't really a joiner. I have always hated being reduced in some way. Jazz boy,
Mm.
right? I mentioned that. It's the same thing. And like I never really belonged to like a group at school or social kind of groups, because I felt like in order to belong, you kind of trade in your complexity and kind of become a
Mm,
piece of the bigger thing. And I cannot do that. I hate it. I don't feel like a reducible person. And
mm.
I really dislike whenever people are like, "Oh, he's the this one," or whatever, and I'm like, "You have no idea." You know what I mean? Who I
So I
am.
shouldn't title this, or maybe I should title this, Don't Call Him Jazz
Yeah,
Boy.
yeah, sure, sure. So anyway, I just hate doing that, and every time I've tried to do it, it's been like a complete hold my nose thing, and I thought it was a necessity, but I can't
Mm,
keep my heart in it long enough to ever really do it. And there's different ways around it. Like, well, just start a bunch of different projects and make the projects niche, but like have your portfolio be. But with the Substack, and that's a great strategy, but with the Substack specifically, I actually, and this is so silly, it's so cringe that I did this, but I had a note that I posted that I think got actually a fair, like, I had like 50 followers and I got like 50 likes or something,
wow.
it was
Hmm.
like something like that where it was like relatively, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. For me, that was just like, I've decided I'm not going to niche. I'm just going to say whatever I want. And like, here's kind of who I am. And like, if you're interested in following me, this is the best I can give you. But like, I'm going to talk about whatever I want and I'm just going to kind of do it. And it was like a declaration to the world for my
Mm,
own benefit so that I would just be like, just do what you want to do. And I was just like, this will come with trade-offs, because if I just was like, I talk about cryptocurrency, then like it's a lot easier for people to be like, oh great, I'm interested in that, and follow if
yeah.
they like one of your articles. But I was just like, maybe it doesn't matter so much how many people follow me as it does that I'm happy about what I'm doing. And so we'll see how the trade-off ends up. I mean, I feel like I've had really steady, really good growth, but I am so much happier because when I'm writing a piece that I don't want to write, it's really hard to write. And when I'm writing the exact piece that I do want to write, nothing could be easier. It's the feather bed. And that's what it is. Every time I open my computer, it's like, what am I thinking about? And I believe that I'm an interesting person who thinks about interesting things. And so if you're interested in interesting things, you'll be interested in my writing, regardless of what it is. I would love to read me, is kind of how I feel about it. And so we'll find out if there's a market for people like me, or a market of people like me for people like me. I still don't really know. It'll be fun if, in a few years, it's like, and now I'm, what's his name? I don't know. Whoever the big Substacker is right now. But
Yeah.
I
No, I
can't
think,
say that yet, but yeah.
but I think it's cool to, I think that what you're expressing and, why the subscriber count goes up is it's authentic and it's real and it's messy, but it's like very well done. It's very well written. And like I kind of like how random
Well,
it
good.
is. Like I loved your piece on the crows,
Yeah.
for instance. Maybe we could talk a little bit. We'll spend like 1 minute on that. Tell us what's going on with your crowmance and
Nice.
your efforts to strike up friendships with
Yeah,
crows.
like almost nothing. I wrote that piece and then I felt like I was like, it's funny because I keep writing pieces and then I feel like I get these problems out of my system and then I just move on to new problems. And I've never iterated this quickly through problems in my life
Mm,
ever. It's
mm-hmm.
crazy. And this is why because I was like, most of my old projects, I would have said, if they don't get attention, I'm going to do something else because it's not worth it to me to do it in a vacuum. And Substack is the first thing where I'm like, I'm going to keep doing this no matter if anyone's paying attention, because it's changing my life
Mm.
so much for the better. And so the crow thing, like I still see crows and I've still been putting nuts out for them and stuff when I can, but like we've made no progress on it. And I think after I wrote the piece, I kind of was like, I was hyperbolizing the intensity of my desire a little bit. And once I got it out of my system, I was like, all right, I'm gonna focus on other things. But I will I still intend to do it before I die, but it's not a high
It's not like a,
urgency.
a burning
No,
platform
it's not a high urgency
need.
situation, but um
Yeah.
yeah.
Um, and then, so you say that the writing on Substack has, it's changed your life and it's something that you want to keep doing. What are some of the changes that you've noticed?
Well, what's interesting is I keep a list, as many writers do. I keep a list of topics and theses and ideas that I have, and I'm watching those change. And I go back and I
Mm.
look at some of my old ones and I'm like, oh, I'm not that worried about that anymore. So, like, a lot of the status stuff, I spent a lot of time like, oh, like what, you know, like what should I be doing with my creative time and energy that I have? Or like, I have these things that make me feel guilty about as a parent, or I'm just like grappling with these emotions or circumstances or questions about how to proceed. And I think more than ever, I don't feel burdened by questions of how to proceed. I'm like,
Mm.
I'm going to keep being a parent. I'm going to keep doing my best with it, and I do enjoy it. And like being able to express the things that are hard about it has made me enjoy it more because I kind of like process them, and then I just am
Yeah.
like, oh, actually it's not as bad as I kind of thought it was.
Hmm.
And I'm going to keep writing on Substack, and I'm going to write about whatever I want. And like these were big questions, like is this worth doing, and am I going to get a platform, and blah blah blah. And now I'm like, I don't really care that much. Like I have about 500 subscribers, and if that's where it stays, then I'm still going to write for those people
Yeah.
and like for myself. And I actually was able to process some of the niching down thing. I started an Instagram page in a hyper niched genre of music that I really like.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I've been recording on that, and just I'm like, yeah, I can just do this, and it feels good. And so just I sort of just feel like really, really at peace with where I am in my life right now, in a way that 6 months ago I just felt the opposite. I was just constantly
Wow.
reevaluating. And frankly, before that, I mean, when I was in the law, and it's like, what am I doing? How am I going to do it? Am I going to get there? Am I going to? And now I'm just like, yeah, what I'm doing is the right thing for now, and we'll see where it goes, and I'm happy doing it. So that, I mean, you can't pay for that. I mean, give me a break. You know what I
No,
mean?
that's amazing. You're at peace. Like,
Yeah.
that's the
Yeah,
goal.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. So maybe I just needed therapy, but the funny thing was that like I've done a little bit of that, and it can be helpful, but I think I needed to be my own therapist a little bit, and
Mm.
like I just what I was feeling was the need to express some things, and duly expressed, that itch that was just day and night plagued me has kind of gone away. And now
Mm.
I keep getting things come up, and they're interesting, and I write about them, and then they flow through me. And so I feel like I'm just life is flowing through me in a way, and I'm growing. Whereas before it was kind of like things, I felt damn like there was a, you know what I mean? Like pooling and like threatening to spill over. And
Overwhelmed.
now I've got these channels of like, yeah, I'm going to write about this, and then I feel better. So it's just been great.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. I feel like this is like an ad for Substack.
I know. I'm such a
If
shill.
you guys are listening.
I'm such a shill. I'm such a shill for I really like the platform, but interestingly, it's like it's not necessary that it be a Substack. It was just the thing that I needed to make it feel like it was legit, which was one of the initial things I needed to get over my reluctance.
Yeah. So, just as this has been wonderful, Jordan, and just before we close, I guess, what's one piece of advice that you'd give to someone who is considering, who's afraid to step into their creative expression? Or like, what's the advice that you would have given to yourself maybe six
Yeah,
months ago?
I would subscribe to me. I think I can fix all your problems.
At Jordan Call on
That's
Substack
right. That's right.
with the farewell files.
The farewell files. So no, I think that, I mean, one thing is just was, and the reason that I said that was because I immediately thought of one of my own pieces, recent pieces, which argues, and I could be wrong, but even if I'm wrong, I think it would be useful to believe that I'm right, which is
Mm.
that it doesn't really matter that much what other people think about what you do. It really just doesn't matter that much. And, other people's advice, especially people you admire, can be very valuable to seek out. But like, if you're not seeking those people's advice, or if they don't have a life that you would want to have,
Mm.
it's not clear why you should be really giving it that much weight. I also think that like trying to do some of this, I'm weaving in some of our threads from this discussion, trying to do some of this structured introspection through maybe writing, even if it's just in a journal, but like taking time to to not just think about, but like make concrete, like the things that you really do want in your life. Like take a I'm 80 years old. How do I feel about how I spent my life kind of perspective, and try that on and see, you know, and then try a really immediate perspective. How do I feel minute to minute about what I'm doing,
Mm-hmm.
and like working through some of that, you might get more clarity about the right next step. I mean, another thing would just be like take steps. Like you don't have to jump all the way to everything all the time, but like be taking steps directionally that feel right. Like the right next step is almost always the most important thing. What's the right next step? Not that they all have to be right, but like, because they add up to being the right thing, I think, even if some are in kind of wrong
Yeah. It's like
directions.
taking a next step.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I think the better you can make each step based on your current judgment, the better where you end up will be, right?
Mm.
If that makes sense, right? And I had one other thing, I think, but maybe I'll have to save it for a paywalled piece.
Cliffhanger.
I have
Yes.
to um but yeah, and like figure out what you want, figure out if there's a way to get it. Read people like Paul Millard, Henrik Carlson. They talk about structuring your life and have some really great insights. And yeah, I think the last thing I'll say, and this, I guess this was it, is that like, if you don't just settle or just get complacent, if you're always pushing to have a more authentic, more agentic, better fit, a better suited life, then you're going to get there eventually. That's
Mm-hmm.
my belief. Or at
Mm-hmm.
least you're going to improve your situation. I think the
Yeah.
worst thing to do is just be like, well, this is a locally optimal solution, and I'm just going to kind of turn off and just do like just do whatever the path of least resistance is,
Mm.
you know. Turn it back on. Turn it all back on, your feelings and your thoughts, and like push for the right thing. It's worth
Yeah. It's your life, right? Like we shouldn't settle for something that sucks.
yeah. It's worth
Like
finding.
it's worth finding if there's something that lights you up. And at least, maybe there's not a specific destination of like, oh, now it's this forevermore, but it's in this moment. Are there things that light me up? Do I generally feel excited about the life that I'm leaving?
Yeah. I think that's right. So that's a package of advice. That's your starter pack.
Wow, that's your starter
Yeah,
pack.
yeah.
Okay, and then $9.99 a month
Yeah,
for
exactly. Yeah.
the
No, I
latest.
will I should say that if you buy my course, I will solve all of these problems
All
for
of these
you,
problems.
and you can approach it
Yes.
completely passively and end up with the exact life that you want.
30-day money back guarantee.
Yeah. It's very expensive, but it's worth it.
But it's absolutely
So,
worth it.
yeah.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much,
Yeah,
Jordan.
thank you.
This was a pleasure, a delight, and yeah, so happy that we could chat.
Yeah, thank you. The pleasure has been mine.